Thanks for joining the video cast. This is DevSecOps, the good, the bad, the ugly. And I got here with me Steve Boone. Steve, thanks for joining me.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be a part of this.
Absolutely. So Steve, I know we had a chance to catch up, but can you maybe share with everybody what you do? I know you've been at Urban Code for a while. You were a sales engineer for a long time that converted to where you're leading product management. So if you could, just give a little history, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. I started in technical sales, and I did that for 6-7 years, and I loved every minute of it. I think one of the fun parts about technical sales is you get to interact with the customers and actually really passionately understand their challenges.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for me, it was an opportunity to take that kind of passion of interacting with clients and bringing it back to the product, right? And so every opportunity I had to sit down with product managers who were trying to, dream up the next big thing, it was an opportunity to say, well, hey, I'm talking with these folks. I don't think they're necessarily looking for the next big thing. They're looking for the next tactical thing, like solve this fundamental problem for me today. And I don't know, I got hooked on that. And, I was fortunate enough to have a lot of mentors, both in technical sales, and on the product management side that understood what I was trying to do, which was bring the core challenges to the product in a single, quickest way possible. And luckily I had people that allowed me to do that. So that's where I am today. I oversee all the Urban Code portfolio. We got about 4 different products, both through the IBM and HCL channels. So it's pretty cool.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I completely can relate with that story because my sales engineer, Artie, he's literally like one of the smartest guys now because he's, talking to people, about their DevSecOps problems every day. So I just, think that he's, at a place that well equips him for moving into some of those other types of roles, right? Because he's getting to understand all the problems.
That's right.
Every single organization's getting to go through. So that's interesting. I really enjoyed that. So today you're going to talk about value stream mapping, which I think is pretty interesting. Can you, for people that don't understand that terminology, you walk us through what is value stream mapping and why is it important to DevOps as well?
It's not, value stream mapping is not new. I think that you'll see a lot of people talking about value stream management or the art of managing those mappings. The reality is something that a lot of companies are doing today. They're looking at, how do we deliver software? What's our internal processes? Where do we get slowed down? I think that there's a lot of opportunity to do it in real time and to do it more effectively. And we talk about DevOps, we talk about fast feedback cycles, right? So how can I get stuff out there, get it in front of a customer, get feedback, and then bring it back into the product? Same thing. We want to take that same iterative approach, but really start to understand how work moves through an industry from an idea all the way to a tangible deliverable, right? Whether that's could be something that's sitting in production or something that a customer is capable of using. But it's broader than just development, right? And I think that's kind of the key thing.
Right. So you mentioned something, just about making it visible, right, in your pipelines. And again, there's a book that I constantly go back to all the time, which is the Phoenix Project by
That's a good one.
He's written a lot of resources, but the theory of constraints, and he talks about WIP making work in process, making that visible to where that way where are the bottlenecks to where you can, basically you want to speed up the area of the bottleneck that's basically creating that friction. Because if you work on another area that already has a lot of flow going through it, it's just gonna pile up at wherever that constraint is. So when can you talk about what is the importance of making work visible there?
Yeah, the visibility aspect I think plays a lot into it, right? If especially in the value stream space, a lot of folks out there are talking about the metrics around value stream and making those visible. So people point to things like, and Dora is a big proponent of this, right? So MTTR, mean time to recovery, throughput, lead time, cycle time, right? By making those metrics visible, it should give you some indication of the health of your value stream. But the reality is that's a good starting point. I think what we're trying to do is take the concept that people have done today with something like a Kanban board, right? And say, okay, I know what work is in the backlog, what's to do, what's in progress, what's done, but it's a pretty simplistic way of looking at it. And at best, it's maybe updated daily. What we want to do is start looking at the data that's coming from all of the tools and actually try to build a relationship with that data. So what are your pull requests? What are they tied to? Which work items? What builds produced to them? What part of what deployment version and what environment? And really build like a chain of custody or a chain of record.
Yeah.
And when we can visualize that work, we can see, well, how long does it stay in different areas? And that doesn't necessarily mean like dev, QA, but more like, how long did it take to code review? How long did it take for us to get a design from design? How long did it take for us to get the appropriate documentation? All the things that outside of the development that also impact being able to release software in a large company.
Right.
As product managers, one of the things we're constantly asked for is, well, how do we know, or I should rephrase that, when are we going to deliver and what are we going to deliver? Yeah. And forecasting that sometimes 6-12 months out, it's really hard to do. And so unless you've got good idea of where development interacts and intersects with the other parts of the business and, right, and what those implications are, it's really hard to get a good idea of that work and the time it takes.
So who's typically running this project, Steve? I mean, and then like what groups should that person be looking to pull in if they're starting,
Yeah. It's a couple different ways. So we've got groups we're working on where they're just development teams, right? And the development teams in and of themselves have their own development initiatives that they want to improve. So how do we get better at agile, right? How do we communicate better, especially now when everyone's working remotely? We actually just did a webinar on this. So the value stream could not be more of a topic that fits with this kind of COVID crisis, because how do you make sure, and communicate and collaborate as a development team? Hey, who's working on what might they be stuck on, right? So if we can look at things like work in progress, if we can look at stories in a backlog or maybe stories that are in development and say, hey, this person's been stuck on this story for 2 days. Maybe we should reach out and say, hey, do you need help? Are you stuck technically? Is there somebody else in the business holding you up? Are you waiting on something? Right. So that visibility is extremely important. So we see it at a dev level, but we also see it more from a top-down level, C-level executives that are looking for, I'll say, shifting governance left, right? So if I want to take a security example, right? If I want to know all of my applications and which teams ran some scans in the last 30 days, I want to see that kind of view top-down, and more importantly, I want to identify teams that aren't running scans. What's the frequency of those runs? What are the results trending as? Are we finding less and less over time?
Right.
So being able to kind of grab all of that data and put it and visualize it and associate it to the things that we're scanning and the releases of the software we're producing becomes important.
Yep. Is that one of the areas that you find most people are looking to the functional areas that they're looking to focus on first, or with value stream mapping, or where do you see people wanting to, I guess, get the best to start with?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of interesting, I guess, first steps in. We see it, people just plainly on collaboration, right? Mm-hmm. Visualize and understand what my development teams are doing. And then the other one is business alignment. How do I make sure what my teams are doing are actually aligned to my business goals? So, as an organization, if they come down and say, hey, the next release of Sonatype is going to have these killer wow statements, right? People are going to be able to do X, Y, and Z easier because of the things we're delivering. Well, then as a product manager, development manager, I want to make sure that the things we're working on are actually tied to those overall goals that the business wants us to deliver on. So those are the main inroads. That's where we see a lot of adoption at.
Yeah, no, that's great. So another thing that I'm trying to do with this videocast, podcast, whatever you call it, is send people to some resources, right, to where they can learn more about it.
Yep.
I'll probably ask you if you can go, post some resources or links to it. And yeah, hopefully anybody else that's watching can also share some other resources as well. Anything that comes to mind that you could recommend to us?
Yeah, we got two things. One thing we have a ebook that I wrote with a couple of my other counterparts, but it's essentially how do you get started with value stream management? And this is a no download software thing, right? If we want to do this fundamentally on paper, on whiteboard, how do we map out our value stream? What are some important things to think about when we talk about plotting out our value stream? Who should we get involved? Yeah. And then we just recently did a webinar through the HCL channel that I'd share the link with you guys, but it's essentially around aligning your development initiatives to your business goals. So when you get those top-down things, or if you are working remotely from home, how do you start to get that alignment, get that strategy, and get everybody moving in the same direction? Yeah. Especially now when you've got folks, like I said, working remotely, it's hard to do.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. No, I think it's extremely pertinent for what we're all dealing with right now, right, in the world today. So, hey, Steve, I really appreciate your time and being willing to jump on here and get some engagement with the community.
Hey, I really appreciate you having me on, and would love to do another one again sometime. Thanks a lot.
Absolutely, Steve. Let's stay in touch, all right?